All right. Well, how many of you guys have actually written a listing agreement? Just show by hand or say it out loud. John has. There you go. We've got a few people who've done them. I know Fresh's done them. I think that Rachel's done a few of them. Connie definitely has. Robert, I think, has done a few. So not a lot of changes in it, but there are some things that are changing. And even though we have a new one, relatively new, that they did in 2021, I suspect we'll be seeing another change, another iteration. So we're going to kind of zip through this one today a little bit. So I'm going to share my screen with you guys. And lo and behold, you seeing that, Ted?
It's coming up. I mean, like I said, I'm on my hotspot, so it's a little slow.
Okay.
Here,
How about the rest of you guys who have internet? We're a little slow in the main office today. I had to run back up to the house because the internet had died and I didn't want to leave you guys hanging on this. So everyone, can you see the New Mexico Association Realtor listing agreement?
Yep.
I always advise you guys that it's always a good idea to download a copy of this before we do it. You can annotate it if you email me after the class, but it's always a good time to kind of fill it out or write scribble notes on your own. But if you don't, just scribble along and we'll go through this thing. It shouldn't take too long of a class today, but here it is, the infamous listing agreement. You guys probably heard Ray and I talking quite a bit on the three. That's where you want to be right now, is being a listing agent. Not that it isn't something you don't want to do all the time, but right now with the advent that there's no inventory, it's kind of important that you're chasing the listings. And I know that Ray has shown all of us some really cool things to do with farming and, utilizing social media. But there's also the old school way. You guys will always hear me talk about your database. If you're not working your database, your sphere of influences, well, you're not coming to work every day. That's really the bottom line. You've got to make those phone calls to your friends, your family. Don't ever be shy that you're a realtor, a broker. And I know that that's kind of always a situation. Some people, particularly when you first get in business, you go, yeah, I really don't want my people to know that I sell real estate. I'm like a used car salesman. Trust me, used car salesmen do not go through the level of education that you all do all the time, right? You also spend a lot of money for your life. Between all the things that you do, you land up paying for your licenses, you land up paying through E&O, your insurances, you land up paying through MLS, and you may be more than one. You are a professional, and professionals learn how to write these contracts correctly. So the listing is one that we're going to go through today. Some of this kind of is secondary because we've talked about it in the purchase agreement. If you recall, the first 2 pages of the listing agreement and the purchase agreement are identical. They basically talk about your broker duties. So I'm not going to repeat too much on this, with a few things that I like to point out. First and foremost, read it. That's what I'm always amazed. I get calls and somebody will say something to me about, well, Tom, how do I do this? Or, well, wait a minute, did you read the agreement? Well, no, I just ran into this problem. Well, that gives me kind of an immediate clue that they haven't taken the time to take this, print one out and take it as your evening go to sleep situation, put it in a notebook and read the agreement. I'm no different than you guys as a practicing broker as well. You know what? I read these things and sometimes it's, but that's exactly what you've got to do. One of the things I always like pointing out is this section B, because a lot of times I get into issues with other QBs and because of their broker or our brokers who go, well, I didn't represent the buyer. I was a listing broker. Well, if you read section B right off the bat, you'll see what it says there. In addition to the above duties, broker owes the following broker duties to the buyers in this transaction to whom the brokers are directly providing real estate services, regardless of the scope of the nature of the services. That's code of ethics, guys. All that means, so you are representing the seller. That does not mean you're disrespectful to the buyer's broker, or God forbid, the buyers. And, what makes me very unhappy is every once in a while I get a phone call and people will say, well, your listing agreement with people, they said they were going to meet us at a certain time at a certain place, and they weren't there. And I'll call my broker and say, oh, I forgot, or I didn't put it in my calendar. Well, that's being disrespectful. And that's just a minor one of making sure that you are being representative in this industry, not only to your clients, but also the clients of the buyers. Okay. So don't want to beat you guys too much on that. So I'm not going to go through all of it. One thing that does come up quite a bit is the transaction. Who are we? I'll get people calling me up and says, well, I've got a person out of, I like to use New Jersey. And they want to say, hey, we represent them, that, we have agency between us. And we probably all, and you've all had your classes long enough, agency is kind of becoming a thing of the past. To my knowledge, I only know of one broker in this town who still is using agency. Agency, remember, is not only are you speaking on their behalf, but technically they're speaking on your behalf. So, I know I don't really like the idea of somebody speaking for me. And, there was a time and a place for this, but it has really grown into be somewhat of a legal issue more than anything. So we at Keller Williams, unless you get a special, have a special conversation with me, we are transaction brokers. That means we are nothing more but a conduit to the transaction. So there are those times. They're very, very, very rare that we'll do exclusive agency. We see it more in commercial than we do see it in residential. So be careful with that. When an individual asks you, well, wait a minute, I thought you only represented me. That's why you explained to them that you, as a transaction broker, has a non-fiduciary relationship. And we used to like to use that all the time. And I hear it on occasion. People use that in the scripts. Well, I have a fiduciary responsibility to my client. No, you have broker duties to your client, but you no longer have a fiduciary responsibility to them. That's created by law. So, if that's still in your head that you're an agent, and again, the reason we don't even use the word I'm an agent, we use the word associate broker, is because one can say, well, he said he was my agent, which could simply imply that you had agency with him. Okay. Any questions on that? Just jump in if you have one. All right. One thing I always do, and I highly recommend that any kind of agreement that you're working with, be it a listing agreement or be it any purchase agreement, any agreement, always look at the very bottom and see the last time that this thing has been updated. At this point, you can see that this has been updated on January 2021. And here we are in April, and I'm already seeing things that are changing because of disclosure. I would suspect probably within the next 30 days, we'll have that. If we do, we'll just do a very short update on that as a class. We might even be able to get it during the 3 o'clock program. For those of you who hear me talk about the 3 o'clock, man, I can't tell you guys of how important this daily huddle that Ray and I do every day. And it's not because the ego that I'm on every day or Ray's on. Believe me, we too would like to sometimes do something different at 3 o'clock and get on the video. But what we're finding is that at that 3 o'clock, there's a lot of good exchange going on with the broker to broker, not even Ray and I talking. They're talking about very thing. We'll talk about somebody who may have had an issue with radon, or somebody had an issue with an inspection. So if, at the very least, if you can set aside that 15 to 30 minutes every day on your calendar, jump on to see what the topic's about, it's always kind of good. And then exactly if a new form comes out, that's when I'm going to announce it during that 3 o'clock. Okay. This might, I don't know if it's coming out on yours. Sometimes it gets a little funky here. That is actually transaction coordinator is what it is. We have a office TC. You know, you can pay for her services, and that's Paula Travis. So if you are going to use a TC and you want to use ours in the office, you can see if you can hire Paula to do some of your work. She really will do all of your paperwork for the most part. Doesn't mean that you can't use another person as a TC, but understand that if you are licensed under me as a qualifying broker, that TC also has to be licensed under me. We have Kelsey Foreman, who is down in Rio Doso. She's also doing some work, but you know, her services are a little bit different than Paula's, but both of them, again, are out for hire. So it's something to do. And if you have a listing agreement, you need to disclose that with a check mark up there and communicate to your seller that, oh, by the way, I use a TC. And they may ask you to what level are you using a TC? And you can say, well, you know, you're going to see me now and you'll never see me again, because all the paperwork is going to be done through her. Please don't do that for your own benefit of growing your business. But there are companies and there are big brokers in this town that I have told our brokers a number of times when they're competing against them, go ahead and ask that person that you're trying to get the listing. Oh, I understand that you're, you know, interviewing this particular broker as well. Is she going to do the entire transaction for you? Oh, then we haven't talked about it. Well, you might want to talk about it, because there's a good possibility she'll take your listing, but you'll never see her again until maybe it's time to pay the check. So that's just more of a arm wrestle kind of situation than anything else. Okay, so that's that. This one comes up quite a bit. You know, well, Tom, this is my boyfriend, or this is my uncle or my cousin, or it's my second to third removed cousin of my brother. Do we need to put this conflict of interest, material interest here? You know, I kind of only go down to like the cousin level. I think once you start going to second and third cousins, you know, I'm from northern New Mexico, from a very Hispanic community, and man, I guarantee you I could connect at some point or another. I'm related to them. But, you know, does that mean that I really know them that well? Probably not. However, if it was my brother, hypothetically speaking, and I was selling his property, I definitely would say that seller's broker or seller is related to me as a brother. Okay, very simple. We're going to keep going here. Any other agreements that you have in the transaction? That's just where you disclose. One thing you always make sure is that when you are listing a property for somebody, ask them that question. You know, are you a broker? Oh, more importantly, are you subject to another existing listing on this subject property? I'll give you a quick little shaggy dog. But truth being said, we had one of our brokers doing very well in the company, but he was went back into the MLS, and he saw that the listing that he was now going to take said temporarily withdrawn. What does that mean? We talked a little bit about it, and lo and behold, it turned out that the listing of the previous broker had technically not terminated. It was just being withdrawn until I think the end of March. This was back in February. And there were some additional agreements that they had agreed upon, i.e. like paying for some of the marketing, whatever it may have been. But if he would have taken that listing, it would have caused a lot of issues. So when you're talking to your seller, your list property, say, you know, did you totally terminate? If they listed before, is everything terminated? Can I see the termination agreement that you got from them? Don't just assume, because then you're calling me and I'm calling the other QB and saying, oh, Amy is new into town and she didn't realize that so-and-so had still a listing on that. So let's work through it. It can normally be worked through, but sometimes it can get a little sticky. So just make sure, all right? Here's one that's always kind of a little bugaboo for me a little bit, is I'll get a listing agreement and all they'll have is the broker's name, the firm, that's all, and nothing about it. And it's real easy to do. If you go into Paragon, go to membership, go to last name, you can find out a lot of information about the selling, the listing broker, the buyer's broker, whatever it may be there. So, take the time to fill out as much as you possibly can on any of these kind of agreements. It just makes you look a lot more professional. And as you guys know, that's my major goal, is that I want Keller Williams to be known as the people who are very, very thorough and complete with all of their agreements and contracts. All right. Now we actually get into the agreement after all that little conversation. Exclusive services, the undersigned. And that's where you sellers. Sometimes it may be a trust, or it could even be an LLC. And a lot of people ask me, well, how do you write that, Tom? So I'll use myself, my wife and I, we have a living trust, and it's Thomas P. and Emily and Nora Trujillo Living Trust. That's what it is. All my legal documents are done that way. And however, we are both trustees. So in the case of it being Thomas P. or Emily and Nora Trujillo Living Trust, I would put Tom Trujillo trustee, Leonora Trujillo trustee. Okay. Same thing can happen with an estate. I just finished doing one of that, and it's an estate of Thomas P. and Leonora Trujillo estate. And I went off and kicked the bucket. Well, there's more than likely a power of attorney that was put in place, or a name of a person who becomes the personal representative of that estate. So if it was Thomas P. or Leonora Trujillo estate, and both of us were dead, there's more than likely some instrument that would say Allison Trujillo, personal representative, meaning my daughter. So those are those things you scrub. And again, those are ways that when you're going into Paragon and going on tax information, you know, you can find, if you went and look up Trujillo, you would find that my house was a living trust. Okay, but if you're working with the client, say, how do you take this out? How was the deed of your property done? Because the more you get done up front, the less your panic is going to be when you go to closing. And all of a sudden you found out that the undersigned was Thomas P. or Leonora Trujillo. And then when it's closing time and you're working the title, then it pops up. Oh, well, they actually had a living trust. Now you're writing addendums to change things and getting signatures. So the more you get done up front, the better off you're going to be. Okay. And, you know, that's half the whole thing with the listing agreement, particularly, guys. This is really an interview sheet. That's how I look at it. And you're going to have that conversation, whether it's face-to-face with an individual, or maybe you'll even do it on Zoom, that you're helping them put together their listing agreement. But it's an interview. This is the time that you really have to ask yourself, hey, you know, how are we going to take this listing, all right? Second part, the undersigned brokerage is Keller Williams. That's us, Keller Williams Realty. That is our formal name. You know, I see on occasion Keller Williams, Santa Fe, Keller Williams Realty, Santa Fe, New Mexico. It is Keller Williams Realty. That's the name of the brokerage. Okay. And as you guys know, or maybe you don't, the truth be said is the listing agreement becomes that of the brokerage. In reality, to be ugly about it, what it comes down to, it's not the seller's agent's listing. Once it's signed, it's mine. I'm the QB here, and I oversee it for the company. Okay, so just to give you a heads up, because and the reason that happens when you take a listing like that, that's so different. When I take a listing, it becomes Keller Williams property. If I am driving across the Rio Grande and I drop in the river and drown and die, the listing continues. At the point, whoever the QB is at that time says, well, we're going to go ahead and assign this on over to Brandy, and she can pick it up from there, and off she goes. Okay. Term of the agreement is this one I did on a 6-month period of time. It's not uncommon to do it for a year, but right now in the heat of nothing out there, probably don't need to have one more than 6 months. But you may have one of those stinky projects. You know, I used to tell people, man, if you're doing land, and of course that's even changing, it was not uncommon to do a piece of dirt out in the middle of nowhere for 2 years, year at a minimum. So I have a tendency to do a 6 months when the market's hot, like it is now, because that's showing a little bit of my ability selling it for my seller. Sometimes you may also even do a 3-month. Depends. Okay, so all the red is just kind of a cheat sheet for you when you're doing your first listing agreement. When you get the annotated copy, kind of help you along. So I took it for today, and we're going to let them go till the 10th of October, which is a Friday, 2021. Here we go again down to the property. You're going to put the address, physical property of the location. If we're using me as the example, 1677 Sierra Gorda, Santa Fe, New Mexico, 87501. And again, when you're going to do the legal description, just, I see people get lazy and, it says per title binder. Well, okay, you could do that, but, show some professionalism. To show them that you can go into Paragon and you can go to the county and you can look up the street address, find their name, and you can put in the proper legal description, right? Meets and bounds, unless you actually have a meets and bounds survey as an exhibit, you can have that as exhibit 1 if you actually have it. But if you don't, you put not available, but it's in Santa Fe County. And keep in mind, this could be Rio Rivo County, Los Alamos County, whatever, wherever you're taking it. And again, like I said, I'm doing this just kind of as an easy template. Things change. You can see that in this particular place, it's just a simple residential property. But please note, and probably should have put resale there, you probably should have checked off on that, my apologies. But you please note, there's some other things in here. It could be a manufactured housing, all right? So what's that definition of manufactured housing? We've had a lot of conversation with this up to 3 o'clock. And, right now, pretty much any trailer is manufactured housing or a home that was built off-site but brought in on a trailer. In the old days, we used to define mobile home versus manufactured home housing. A mobile home they still had the wheels on it, and it was all part of the chassis. Nowadays, manufactured homes have changed a lot. You not only have a double wide, you have triple wides, and they're being brought in on, those big trailers, and, they're just slid off the trailer right onto the foundation of manufactured homes. Okay. Okay, any questions on any of that? Everybody doing okay? Okay. We'll go on over here to my favorite one. Okay, oh, this is a good one, just the other rights. And you can see that because you get caught up that a little bit, particularly when you get up in northern New Mexico, when you're up in Espanola, unless otherwise provided, seller shall convey all existing wind, solar, water rights, mineral rights, blah, blah, blah. If the seller is aware of any water, solar, blah, blah, mineral rights have been severed from the property. And the reason I say that we get to northern New Mexico, there are water rights that have been severed off. In other words, somebody went off and sold their water rights, your acequia rights, to somebody else. All right. That doesn't mean that they don't have the easement of that acequia running through the middle of their property. They just don't have the rights to irrigate with that water. So we want to, and it's a little sticky out there. For the most part, people are selling their property in its entirety. They're selling it if they have a well on it. They're going to turn over the well to the new buyer. If they do have the acequia water rights, they do have that. So for the most part, just the generic is probably no. Been severed. No, nothing else. All right, this is my fun one because this has changed up a lot. The fixtures.
Tom?
Yes.
Tom, I have a question on you had mentioned that sometimes the water rights have been severed,
Right.
But the easement still runs through the property.
Correct.
So if that was to happen, do you have to have paperwork about
Yes.
an easement?
Yes, you should.
Okay.
And
Okay.
Actually, I know, Rachel, you guys are up there in northern New Mexico, and that's what happened because I always like to use the ranch concept of all of a sudden they're taking the water out of the Precia, that's the little dike north of the main river coming down, and it runs through the neighbor's property, and then all of a sudden there's another property in between that still has that acequia, that the acequia or Mario Loma is still maintaining that section of land, but they've sold off their water rights. But the next guy down the road who the water goes to through the acequia he still has his water rights. So normally the mayordomo will maintain in northern New Mexico those easements. It's a good question. So good question, Rachel. Did that help?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Great. Okay, let's go down to fixtures, appliances, personal property, and exclusions. Fixtures. We all kind of grew up with knowing what a fixture was. You know, if it was permanently attached to the property, it was a fixture. And of course, I've seen more issues of people going, wait a minute, you know, when came to buy the house and the TV was gone. Well, that's, you know, nowadays it's changed. But I like your definition. Fixture is a fixed means the removal of an article causes damage to the real property. In other words, if there was a TV mount for the flat screen television and you go on your walkthrough 2 days before and all you see are big gaping holes in the wall where it was, well, guess what? That was a fixture. You know, in the olden days, we used to say things about curtain rods. If there's gaping holes where the curtain rods, well, that was a fixture. So when you're taking that listing and they have, you know, beautiful antique draperies on an antique curtain rod, and they want to take it for their next house, well, you tell them, well, let's get it out now. You fix the holes behind it, because otherwise we could get caught up with it being a fixture. Okay. So there's a few things that they've changed around, and we'll jump right down to the list of fixtures. There's that concept I said about the attached window coverings. This is and rods, not including curtains, because the curtains, you know, we know they slide off the curtain rod, right? But let's say you have the mini blinds, and the mini blinds are drilled into the soffit there, and they're permanent. Those aren't curtains, they're permanent. Same thing happens with the TV mounts. That's my favorite. And I've had it happen to me that, you know, when I was up at Quail Run and, you know, big television set, you know, we asked the guy, are you taking the TV? He said, oh, yeah, I'm going to take the TV. I'm going to give it to my son. Well, stupid me didn't tell him, well, you can take the TV, but you have to leave the mount. Well, the mount fit the TV. So we're doing walkthrough, and guess what? There's the big gaping holes there, and there I was with my handyman, you know, before closing, making sure that they sealed up the holes that they left behind and that they matched the paint. So when you're doing that, and first thing you walk in that house and you see they have that 48-inch Samsung flat screen on the wall, you ask them that question. Well, is the TV stained? They go, oh, no, we want to take the TV. Okay, well, you do know that if you take the TV, you have to leave the mounting, the TV mount. And they'll quickly say, no, I want to take it with me because it matches. Well, if that's the case, before we open house or put this, why don't you take it down now or make it an exclusion? All right, and we'll get to that in a minute. Same thing goes with solar. This is another one that's been tripping people up. We as brokers are kind of always looking at the house and looking at the, but you know, we don't want to climb on top of the roof to see what's there. But it's a good question. Oh, do you have solar panels? Oh, yeah, we do. Great. Well, do you own them outright? No, we lease them from the company. We have a payment plan. Okay. Well, then we've got to disclose that you have that. Or they can turn right around if it isn't that way. That solar panel company can put a lien on that property, and when you go to closing, and they still owe $48,000 of the $50,000 that they were doing on that lease agreement, all of a sudden there's a lien on it. And the only way they can sell that house is that $48,000 being paid off. So that's a little tricky one, and I got a feeling we're going to see more and more like that. Okay. And of course, you have the TV antenna, satellite, all the typical stuff, but understand the concept behind it. If it's permanently mounted, whatever it is, it's a fixture. Okay? Which then throws us right in, well, what's personal property time? These little checks are kind of kind of the normal things that are left behind, the window coverings, because, you know, who's going to want the old dirty curtains that were hanging there anyway, and they probably fit the window. Most people will want to leave their dryer, their washer, their garage door opener, refrigerator, and, you know, those fireplace grades and screen that fit perfectly that particular keyword. I highlighted, you'll see right there that little S, the plural. And you'll see it not only there, microwaves, dryers, washers, they're now plurals on it. But I highlight the refrigerator because of a case I got involved with, that when they did the walkthrough, lo and behold, the beer refrigerator that had the little tap in the garage was gone. And the new buyer says, well, where's my beer refrigerator? Well, no, that wasn't part of the deal. Well, we said refrigerators, it wasn't marked off on your personal property, and the disclosure said refrigerators, not refrigerator. Well, lo and behold, that listing broker was now buying one of those little beer coolers for the people to buy the house. So those are why those things are there plural. When you get to the purchasing side, if you remember the purchase agreement, it actually identifies how many garage remotes there are. And believe me, after 30 years, I hate to count the number of remotes that I have bought over the years because they got thrown in that junk drawer. And when it was all over and done with, and they had their brothers and sisters helping them move, all those remotes went from that junk drawer into the box. It's a junk drawer, and it was on the way to Amarillo. So just cheaper to buy the remote. But, you know, these are those educational things that you bring to the attention of your seller when you're listing. Exclusions. Following items are excluded from the sale. I always like to put grandma's chandelier there because, you know, grandma had it for years and now it hangs into our dining room. And if you find that that's an exclusion, I always try to communicate to my seller, say, look, guys, if you don't want this to go, why don't we take it down now and make a run to Home Depot and buy something that's nice and affordable and put it there? Why? Because for some reason that chandelier becomes the, oh man, the deal killer when it's all ready to go. And we're going, we'll do the walkthrough. What happened to that beautiful chandelier that was there? Oh, well, that was grandma's and we're taking it with us. Oh, no, we want it. So I always try, if there's any exclusion in my listing agreements, around here in Santa Fe, rest assured there's a lot of sculpture and art. Even with the big time homes, the $1 million properties, you'll see it. You know, beautiful sculpture that they paid $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, if not more. If it's an exclusion, definitely put it in this, but if possible, communicate to the seller and say, hey, look, this is potentially going to be a problem. I got caught up in one years ago in Las Campanas where my client, the seller, had bronze deer in their house outside. And it was a little bit of a bugaboo, but at the end of the day, they got enough money and we finally negotiated out of that, and they landed up, the new buyers kept the deer. Even though I had told my sellers at the time, you know, John's got a big warehouse, why don't you put the deer in the warehouse? They didn't do it, and bada bing, bada boom, it happened a quick deal. Even more important today on these exclusion guys, because you all know that once you have a listing, yeah, and you put it up on that MLS, you know, 2 days later, it's under contract. So you've got to make your people move quickly. That's where the waiver comes into play. We'll get down to that. All right, down there's that wonderful listing price, fictitiously $695. Kind of a reiteration of the broker's obligations. It's no different than the broker's duties, but it's reminding you that you're taking the listing and that, you know, you are here to help assist the seller in locating qualified buyers. That's the marketing that we do. You take the listing, you've convinced the seller, look, you want to hire me, Rachel McMath, because I can sell your property because I know Escalation better than anybody. That's why you hired me. This is my website. I'm going to put you on the website. You're going to be in the MLS. We're going to do open houses. We're going to do all that. You're assisting the seller trying to find a qualified broker. Again, this is a reason that you're a transaction broker on B, if requested. Assisting potential buyer preparing offers and locating financing. Wow, what did you just do there? You double-ended the deal because you found the buyer. And the agreement, basically the listing agreement, points that out right there to the seller that you too, if requested, you're going to assist the buyer. So too often, I find people don't go through this agreement with their listing, with their sellers. And this is the place to say, okay, no surprises. I'm a transaction coordinator. I used to love telling people all the time, you know, aside from listing this property, I just want you guys to know that 6% commission, I am going to work so hard to get the entire 6%. I was never afraid of telling them that I was looking for buyers as well. And yes, I am trained as a transaction coordinator to make this go smoothly for both parties. If I have to sit down with you and the new buyer and I'm in the middle to make this happen, I'll make it happen. But I was never afraid to tell people I'm a transaction coordinator, and this is why, because I want to make the entire 6%. That's how hard I'm going to work for you. Okay. And of course, the normal stuff as well. You're going to be working with your seller with all the pre-closing issues. That's the inspections, whatever, you're going to be there. Same thing with your property tax. Okay. You're going to be getting all the tax levies in line and more than likely assisting. If the buyer's broker is on the other side, you're going to be providing that information. You're going to be such a good seller's broker that, man, they're going to be telling all their friends about you. But the seller too has obligations. And I always like to make them part of the process, that just because I'm your listing broker doesn't mean you're just going to walk away from this situation and me take care of everything, because I would also like you to provide me any kind of records that you have on the property, be it the utilities you use, of course, all your tax stuff, anything that you have, because that information is going to help me sell your property. When I'm doing an open house and somebody says, wow, this is so big, how much does my utilities cost? I want to be as educated about your house as I possibly can. All right. So put them to work for you. Here's one that I know is definitely going to change. G, the seller will, and I put this as I believe the norm, provide a seller property disclosure. Well, I can tell you right now that that will be changed, that they will be providing the adverse material facts disclosure statement, the new one that we talked about, a couple of weeks ago. And that's the new NMAR form 1110. And I have seen it now in DocuSign, and it's also in .loop. The only place I have not found it at this point uploaded has been Instanet. So you're going to have to start, learning a little bit more about DocuSign to get that form. I'm sure Instanet will get it up, but at this point, as a few minutes ago, I looked, it wasn't there. You're going to like the new disclosure, the new adverse materials facts, because all those little check boxes have gone away. And instead, it's more paragraph. So remember this. I'm right now in some litigation with one of our brokers. You never, ever provide or input any of the data on a disclosure form. That is not your responsibility. That is the responsibility of the seller. And believe me, I'm in the middle of one. Fortunately, my broker or our broker did not fill out the property disclosure, but now it turns out that there was items potentially that they're claiming that the seller knew about, and my broker did not, nor the buyer's broker did not, and lo and behold. So you will see me like as each time I do a lawsuit, I get a little meaning. So you do not do anything with that disclosure except to hand it to them and say, please fill this out to the best of your ability. Okay. The adverse materials too, it's really putting people in place. Non-disclosure state. Investors were notorious. Well, all I do is rent the property. I've never lived there. Well, so what the adverse materials disclosure now says, since the ownership of this property, do you have any knowledge on the roof? How's the condition of the roof? Well, if they've only owned it 2 years and have done nothing, well, maybe that's fine. But if they've owned it 15 or 20 years, one would have to argue, well, you guys, you're the owner of this place. Chances are you probably put a new roof, right? So you know that there's been issues with it. Same thing with plumbing. I had a friend of mine speak the other day, says, there's a lot of things that I rent this house, and my husband is very capable, and we don't want the rent to go up, and he's fixed things. Well, that could be a case where the investor may not have known that it was going to be done. But I got a feeling that's not going to be the case if we go to court. Okay. All right. Another one's popped up a lot. Has now been all this on audio and video surveillance. And is there or is there not this? Keep in mind, a Ring doorbell is audio and video surveillance. I have one on my house. I also am kind of a nut, and I love all this Alexa stuff. So I have little pods, little pucks, or even a little screen here. And, so when my wife wants me to come in from dinner or whatever, she'll say, Alexa, drop into Tom and tell him to come. I look at her and it's time for dinner. All right. Well, that is an electronic device. That does hold recordings unless you go and erase them. So if you go in a house, a good one is always the seller goes out of the room for a second and say, Alexa, and see if you get a response. And if you get a response, oh, you have an Alexa device. Now they may change the code, or you can simply ask them and they say, oh yeah, we have it. We have it for our television, or we have it for our child's room, so we can turn it on and hear if they're having any issues. Well, that's the surveillance. So that's one thing that you have to be able not only to put that there is, but you also have to have the ability to communicate that in your MLS, that indeed there is a door ring bell and that the people do have an Alexa device or some other kind of recording device. The reason being, and even, I've got in the days of really showing property and Ring doorbell was just beginning to happen. First thing I do when I go to show a property to see if it had a Ring doorbell. And then I would whisper to my buyers, please don't discuss anything until we get back in the car. Why? Because if they were in front of my house, hypothetically, and I'm the seller, and they're out there, and then all of a sudden they say, "Hey, man, we love this house. Brandy, offer them $695, but man, we would pay the full boat." There you go. Same thing goes to oral offers. This is not HGTV, real estate porn channel that everybody sits there. Let me make the call, Property Brothers, and see if they'll take the deal. Everything's done in writing. Nothing can be consummated in a oral offer. Now, you may have that conversation. This is where they're thinking in this hot market. We're ready to drop you an offer full price. You think your people are going to be willing to look at that? They might say, well, let's let you know, Rachel, that we have 5 other offers on the table. And oh my goodness. All right. So oral has a certain little bit, but you can't finally negotiate an oral offer. They can't hold you to it. It's in writing. Okay? Same thing goes with the offer letter. We used to call them the love letters. Love letters is the reason we want this house. It's the perfect property for my mother, who will be staying with us, and there are no stairs anywhere or steps, and it will be perfect for her. Well, in the old days, that was very, very, okay. Well, nowadays, if they did not get that offer because somebody came in higher, the lawsuit was, you discriminated against my mother because she's in a wheelchair. And you didn't want to have her there. for whatever reasons. So that's why the love letters have gone away. Okay? More on audio surveillance. Again, that's just telling you you have to be able to tell the other broker. And so we will do that. This is basically intellectual property. I just touched on it a little bit. That means that the seller is going to allow you to photograph the property, to do video recordings, to utilize pictures, blah, 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 blah. But we want to make sure that the seller recognizes that they are allowing you to do that. Why? It's called the internet. Santa Fe, another good example, is there are people who have expensive and very, very expensive and precious art hanging on their walls. They may actually have a Rembrandt, who knows? So if that is the case, those things before your photographer comes over to take it, you may have that discussion with your client. Are you okay with this photographing? And the reason being is because this is going to go out on the internet. And knock on wood, we haven't heard of anything, but the day will come that some guy who's somewhat of a crook is going to say, wow, all I need to do is get on Zillow and take a look at all these houses and see what they have inside it before I decide to wait for them not to be there. So this is keeping you off the hook. Okay? Authorization, of course, we want it to be on the MLS. That's the reason they hired you. We also want them to allow you to put whatever that intellectual property on the internet. Okay. We also, depending where it is, you basically, with a lockbox, are asking them to put keys out there so the brokers can access the property. Same thing with signage. But keep in mind, there are some home HOAs and condo associations that will not allow you to have signage. So you have to make a point of understanding, hey guys, just to let you know, we can't put a sign out here because our HOA is there, the condo association. Las Campanas, you can't put a sign out there. Quail Run, condo, you can't put a sign out there. Okay? And again, with photography, basically, will allow you to do some photography. Here's one, and this is coming up a lot these days, the consent. Offers, broker to divulge terms and existence of offers on property in response to inquiry from buyers or cooperating brokers. This is that verbal stuff we talked about a little bit. As a default, I always put existence. So in other words, if John calls me up and says, hey, Tom, you got this property over here. How's it looking over there? Well, if I have 4 other offers, I can tell him, hey, John, I can tell you that I have 4 offers on the table right now. And if he says, well, can you tell me if they're all cash? He's basically asking me for the terms. And at that point, I can say I have not been given that privilege by my seller to tell you the terms. And where that really gets caught up, and we're seeing more and more, and a lot of pressure going on to the brokers, is with these escalation clauses that are really hitting a lot of us. And they're booming up. We'll give you $5,000 over the highest offer, $2,000, whatever it may be. I talked to a broker yesterday. Literally, she put a property on the market, and by the end of the day, she had 5 offers, all of them with escalation. So that's a whole class in itself. We did one, I think, last week, just to give you a little heads up that was communicated yesterday at 3 o'clock. If you did not hear it, Ted, who gets you into our online calendar, which is beautiful that he does, and you should all, if you're Google users, if you subscribe and let us into that, you will populate with the classes. But most importantly, if you missed the class that I did last week on escalation, you can go back to that date, click on the link, and it pops up, and you can see the recorded version of it. And it's easier than even going to my website or to Ray's, whatever it may be. So check in with Ted with that, and I'm sure he'll be talking a little bit more about it at 3 o'clock today. Open houses. This is the fun one. Tom, I have a friend in Albuquerque, they want me to open house for them, can I do it? And then I said, well, who's your QB? Well, you're my QB. Okay. And who's the QB for your friend in Albuquerque? Oh, Jerry Garcia. Well, then you can't do it. You can only do an open house within your broker's brokerage. So, you know, all day long, Claudia can do a open house for John or Brandy or Amy, no problem. But Claudia can't go down and do one for, oh, I don't know, a broker over on Riverside. That's Jerry's domain. The only time you have an exception to that is if you have a qualifying license, if you're a QB. So if I really was wanting to, I could go down and do it for Jerry's client or Jerry's broker. I think I've kind of passed all the days of doing open houses, but as a QB, I could do that. So there's more reason to get your QB if you want to go do open houses in Silver City for Chloe. Again, this is just more authorizations. Of course, the seller does want you to put it on the MLS and the internet, but the seller more than likely, and this is a call, but this is my default, does not want viewers have the capability of writing comments, or does not want to be able to use the AVM features, which is basically we don't have in Santa Fe anyway. But more importantly, you don't want people making comments. You know what? I went to that open house, and I'll tell you what, I just couldn't stand the look of it. Okay. Let me go to a few little chats and see if there's anything that I'm missing with you guys. We'll keep going for right now. Waivers. This is a big hot issue. What does that mean, Tom? And this goes back to the clear cooperation policy. We've had class on that a number of times. Basically what it means, in a nutshell, if you do have a property that you're not ready to put on the MLS, you can certainly put it on a waiver, which means at another date, you will be listing it on the MLS. Can you advertise that? No, not outside of the office. Again, our 3 o'clock chat that we have every day, you can certainly promote that property you have on waiver. It's kind of our unfair advantage of communicating to a broker in the house that, hey, I've got this on waiver and I'll show it to you, but I'm really not ready to put it out on the MLS. Now you have to have a waiver form in place, and you also have to have it partially uploaded in the partial section of the MLS within 48 hours. That's the only way that MLS can check. The rest of the time, it comes through our office as a waiver. Okay. So you can see there, you have an opportunity to explain that to your sellers, and they have a hard time not understanding that. Wait a minute, you have a pocket listing, Tom, but you know, why can't you just tell the world? And it's not on the MLS yet, but tell all your friends, and we'll tell all our friends, and we'll put it on Facebook. No, you can't do that. They can't even put it on Facebook that they're selling their house. Okay, it has to be a live document on the MLS before it can be marketed publicly. Tenant occupied, see that a lot here in Santa Fe. That somebody says, well, we're going to go ahead and sell our house, and we have a casita, and in the casita we have a tenant. Okay, that's going to kick in the tenant consent form 2110 if you have that. And that's first to allow them for you to photograph that casita, their private goods, and also to have open houses with potentially that tenant as well. And that is one that you have to really work with your sellers on and say, look, I can get you the form, but you've got to, it's your contract that you have with your tenant. Are they going to allow us to do an open house? Because we all know, even in that casita or a main house, a tenant can kill a deal in a heartbeat. Why? They don't really want to move, do they? No. So all of a sudden you plan an open house, and that's when they call you 2 hours ahead of time, and you spend all this marketing money and say, you know what, I've decided I want an open house. I don't want anybody coming to the house. So that's, again, you going back to this tenant form and says, well, according to what I have here that you signed with your seller, you are required to allow me to have that open house. Pops up a lot. Compensation. Although we're not price fixing, Keller Williams norm is 6% commission. I like Ray's comments. What's wrong with 7 and what's wrong with 8? Love it. But that becomes that value that you are as a broker. If you have a better market value than Tom Trujillo or anybody else, and you say, you know what, I'll sell your house and I get 7% of what I do. 4 goes to me and 3 goes to cooperating, more power to you. This is kind of a bit fun. The other one here is you also, because this turns into being a bugaboo. Yes, you're charging 6% for your fee, but seller, be aware that you will also be paying gross receipts on my services of my commission. So if I am going to be selling your property and I make $2,000 on commission, you will also be paying 8.4375% to the government, to the state of New Mexico, not to me. You will also be charged, what's that, 8% on 2,400 bucks, whatever they do. Okay, so this one they try to wrap around, and I've seen a lot of my brokers not explain this correctly. That wait a minute, I thought I was only paying you 6% now. Well, you are, but you're also making me pay your gross receipts. Yes, but that's not my money. And how I always explain it, it says, you know, seller, be aware that when you go through this transaction, you know, you may be hiring the septic guy to come pump your septic, or you're hiring the title company, or maybe you even have to pay for the survey. You know, just like anything else, they're going to do the service and they're going to charge you also a gross receipts tax that goes to the governor in the state of New Mexico. It's no different than when you go to the store and you buy something and they charge you gross receipts tax on that. Do you understand that? Oh yeah, and keep in mind, that's the same thing with me. I put myself at the end. I also provide you a service. So just be aware that that's a potential, okay? Let's see. Oh, also the GRT. I put there, you can see there that, you know, easiest way to find it, people say, what's a gross receipt tax? Because they're all over the board. It's a cheaper gross receipts tax in the county of Santa Fe than it is the city of Santa Fe. It is cheaper in Rio Arriba County than in Espanola. So gross receipts are all over the board. Go to Paragon, go to resources, scroll down, gross receipts tax code, print yourself a PDF and keep it in your phone. Okay? Property, if the sale of the property is made within 90 days after this, blah, blah, blah. What this means that if all of a sudden you're protected for 90 days. So if you were the procuring cause of bringing a buyer there at one time or another, and they liked it, within that 90 days, they come back and you off the listing, maybe you lost the listing, maybe they fired you. Maybe they've been talking to each other and saying, hey, you know, we can save you a little money if we get rid of Tom as our broker. And you come back later and I'll sell it to you directly. Well, if it's within that 90 days or 120 days, wait a minute, you were the procuring cause, you should have paid the commission. That's all that is. Okay. Here's that cooperation one. And boy, this, I laughed at so many of our brokers, including our senior brokers, going, I don't understand this percentage. It's the same thing as it was in the past, except in the old contract, it used to say 6%, cooperating 3%. It's the same thing. I've seen people go 50% of sales, which is technically correct, but you can just simply put in there that the cooperating brokerage firm that procured the buyer has followed 3% of the sales commission, plus the GRT. So you are telling your seller, regardless, you will never pay more than 6% plus GRT. But in the event that, you know, somebody from Barker brings the buyer, I will pay them 3%, the 3% will go to them, 3%. Other events. This is always negotiable. I'm a little hardcore. I'm basically saying, if I bring you a willing, capable buyer, seller, if for some reason you decide you don't want to do the deal and everything's in place, you still owe us the 6%. And I like to really kind of, you know, what do they say? Rubber hits the road at this point. But really explaining to them, look, this is a real agreement here. That doesn't mean that, all of a sudden you don't like that person for whatever reason, you look at your house, that you can just walk away. Same thing goes if they go through the whole waivers and objection period of time. And they're saying, okay, we want this fixed and this fixed. You can certainly say no. And if they accept your no, that doesn't mean you can just walk away from this deal. You're obligated to move forward. It is a binding contract. Okay. Compensation for lease, for sake of conversation, and for all of you who are primarily residential brokers, not people who do leases, we're not even going to touch on this. It does not apply. Okay. Now, if you do have an opportunity for doing a lease, we are very fortunate having now amongst our KW family, Valdez Property Management as now a Keller Williams company with us. So that's with Samantha Monet and Becky. So, sometimes this will come up. You can certainly earn a little referral with them, working with them on it. But if you get a property that all of a sudden they say, you know what, we decided we don't want to sell it, but we sure like to lease it out, and you don't walk away completely from the deal, talk to them. And so it's a really good thing that we have going with them as well. All right, this is one. The insurance. You want to make sure that your seller maintains their insurance all the way through the closing. Definitely. And of course, at the same time, you want to make sure that whoever bought the house, that when the insurance ends at midnight, that their insurance kicks in at 12:01 a.m. Why? God forbid that there's a lapse and something happens to the house. Another one is the person keeping their insurance. I've been through one of those little infamous lawsuits of an open house with one of our brokers that the individual across the street came across, elderly gentleman. He slipped and fell on the little landing that was in the garage. He claims the lights were off, the lights were on. He claims that we were negligent. Fortunately, we were not. So we did settle that lawsuit without any damages. But in truth, the person who should have been responsible for that was the homeowner. No different than me having homeowners insurance or us having business insurance at the main office. If somebody tripped and fell and we were negligent for some reason or another, that property insurance would kick in. So that's a reason to always tell your people, you still keep paying your insurance on this, just like you pay your utilities until the day of closing. Ask the questions. Representation. Is this a short sale? We don't want to be having the thing listed, and I've gone through this with some of our brokers, and the bank is knocking on our door. Okay. And if it is a short sale, do you have permission by the bank to sell it as a short sale? Okay. Did you declare bankruptcy during this property? Or where are you at financially? You need to know those things, because the last thing you want to do is have a property that is going to be going into foreclosure. And lo and behold, you get an offer on the thing and you can't do it. You can't perform because the bank won't let you. It's there. Last one too is a relocation company. We're seeing it mostly up in Los Alamos. They don't do a relocation per se, but there are other companies who will, that will say, okay, we will go ahead and buy the property in the name of the company, and then you can sell it. But you want to find out that if the employer can benefit off a relocation situation. Last one is option, or the first right of refusal. Don't see that very often, but there are those times that, let's say it was a family agreement and we went back to that estate, and I'll use my brother. Hypothetically, I made a note to him to say, hey, look, before Alice and my daughter can sell our house, you have the first right to buy it. You've always liked it, you can buy it. So you just find out those things. Does anybody have any rights to buy your property? First right of refusal. The hold harmless. This is the one I'm living through as we speak. That the seller sign off on when they sign this agreement. They basically are giving maybe I can't say the word, indemnification release to you. The seller shall hold harmless not only you, but the brokerage firms from any liability, damages, including attorney's fees arising from the following: the incorrect or undisclosed information about the property. Did you know this information? And even though we took the listing agreement, you didn't disclose it. And now they're calling me in, the qualifying broker, right along with the broker, Rachel McNabb, because they said she knew and we didn't know that. So seller, be aware that if you're not disclosing something, when we get called to court, it's on you, not us. Okay? Claims of personal injury, third party. There you go again. There's a lawsuit on this property. Somebody fell off the roof when they were fixing it. Now they're suing them. You need to let me know. Same thing with any kind of copyrights infringing from the seller listing contract. But let's say hypothetically they give you photographs and they were taken by a famous photographer and they don't have any rights to those photographs. Incidentally, same thing happens to you as brokers. I've seen it happen that all of a sudden photographs that were of the previous listing agreement show up on our listing agreement. That's a no-no. They do not belong to you. They may not even belong to the listing broker. They may belong to the photographer. They have copyrights on that. Okay, that doesn't mean you can't go to that photographer and buy them again if you need to, or the seller to buy them again if they need to. But you do not have the right to lift existing photographs off the MLS because now you got the listing. Okay? Here's one that comes up all the time, and it's now the proof of funds. If it's a loan, you've got proof of funds coming to your lender. If it's a same thing with the cash deal. What does not work, and people have tried it, is a snapshot or a screenshot of their bank statement. I've got $1 million in the bank. Here's my bank statement. No, that's not what we want. We want a letter from your financial institution saying, that that Pam Sawyer indeed has $1 million in the bank, and she can't afford this deal. We want it with the letterhead on it. But even so, with that letterhead on it, it does also give us the premise of, I'm sorry, guys. Did I lose you? I hit the wrong button. Can you see it? I can't see it. Hang on. I talked more than I should have. Where did you go? Let me stop sharing. I'll share it. Something, hit the wrong button, guys. I apologize. There it is. Even though it basically has given us a little breathing room, broker is not responsible for verifying the authenticity of the pre-qual or proof of letters. We know Photoshop, talk to my good friend Ted, I'm sure he can make a beautiful letter. But again, that doesn't let you off the hook. It's a buyer's broker that you don't provide the proper documentation. All right, where are we at? This is one, because we get into this all the time. This is another one of those that the seller has to know that they can not hold you or hold you harmless. If by chance you recommended a builder, a contractor, title company, an inspector, a lender, blah, 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 because they ask us that. And, I'm always telling you guys, stay in your lane. If you don't know someone, don't know. But if you are making a recommendation, give them at least 3. But at the end of the day, you give them the information. You can contact these people. I've had pretty good, they've been happy with some of my people in the past. But at the end of the day, it is who they hire, not who you hire for them. In the olden days, we used to hire the building inspector all the time. Oh yeah, Randy Moore's a good guy. I'll call him and I'll set it all up. You don't do that anymore. You say, here's Randy's information. Please call them. You guys make your information, or whoever the other 2 other people you have. Same thing goes with septic. Same thing goes with title companies to a degree, because the title company can work a little bit and your lender will work with that to some degree. But at the end of the day, this clause basically saying, regardless who Tom Trujillo recommended to you, it was up to you, seller, to select them and hire them, and you can't hold it against them. So it's a good clause that we have. Inspection reports, we're seeing more and more of this all the time. We all know by now that if you're the buyer and your property is being inspected as the seller, you no longer send the entire inspection report back. And we still get it. I can't tell you how many of our brokers call me and says, Tom, one of our listings is something, I do not open it, send it back to them and say, send me only the parts that are pertinent to your objections that you have to this property. The only time that an entire inspection can be sent if the seller requests it. And they send you an email, and then you forward that email. The seller would very much like to have the entire inspection. The downside to that is that once the seller has the entire inspection report, he is now subject to disclosure. And he may not have known that the roof was in bad shape before, but if it says it on the disclosure, he is now responsible of changing that property disclosure. In the new adverse material, it's now called an addendum. So if they learn something, boom. Same thing happens. Let's say that you go through the whole process and they only give you 2 or 3 items to repair in the inspection, but somewhere along the line before closing, the deal falls through. Well, you now have actual knowledge, and the seller now has actual knowledge. What he will be preparing is an addendum to the adverse material amendment that you will be doing. So that's yet to come, but be prepared on that. Non-discrimination, I don't need to beat you guys up on that. Lead-based paint, one last comment, always to remind you that if you have a property that was built before 1978, you better get the lead-based paint addendum time-stamped prior to that purchase agreement. Addendum first, purchase agreement second. So if they're going to send you the packet together, that buyer should have signed off on that addendum at 2 o'clock and the purchase agreement at 2:13 in that order. HOAs and COAs coming up a lot. They have given us the exact forms that you need. So if you're taking a listing that was within an HOA, at the minimum, you better have 4650 as well. Because at the end of the day, they are going to be looking for 4600. Same thing with condos. I think that one's coming up within 2 weeks, those extra forms to go along with your purchase on your listing agreements. Force majeure, we all know that one, right? The act of God. Well, the one that is now there as well, and it's not in this particular new document, it will be probably in the new listing agreement pretty quick, will include pandemics. Because that was something that we didn't have control of, and it came and it got us. But in most cases, the only time that agreement will, terminate or can be delayed or whatever it may be is, if a forest fire comes through Santa Fe and takes everything else, we don't have anything else to sell. Entire agreement, you might have a few addendums with it. If you actually have within the agreement, maybe you did the septic, that's when you do a check mark and you put the form numbers in. Wire fraud, you no longer have to do the separate wire fraud because now both the purchase agreement and the listing agreement has it. Okay. Signatures, that's kind of important. This is going to also change, I know that. Of course, it's going to be your name up front and your signature. Right now, it has me as your qualifying broker. More than likely, it's going to ask for my license number. People are still sending me theirs in for signature. I have no problem signing it. But that more than likely will change and just have my license number like the purchase agreement. That's who we are, Keller Williams Realty. I always recommend to put in your cell phone number as well as this, because more than likely your seller will have a copy of this. And instead of calling the office number and we don't know where you are, it's kind of important that they have your cell. Okay. So that's kind of all of it in a nutshell. Let me take a quick look at the chat. I see 10 questions and see if we answer them all. Difference are, let's see, there are vast differences between the used cars. Okay, thank you, Robert. Robert. I guess they're all Robert wanting to talk to them. Any other questions that you guys may have that you did not understand that I can go back to? Perfect.
I have one.
All right, Beth.
Okay. So I have a couple that we signed listing agreement, but they don't want to go, they're moving on June the 28th. So they don't want to be listed on MLS. They don't want to go live right away. They
Okay.
want to wait until the 1st of May to go
Okay.
live on MLS. So in that case, is that requiring a waiver?
If you want to talk it up to anybody in the office, that
Well, not yet. I mean, they're not ready. The house isn't ready to be shown. We haven't had photography or anything like that. But just because it's going to be a long time between the actual listing and when we go live, I don't have to have a waiver, right?
you don't. Well, but I would highly recommend it, because let's say that you also run into somebody who is looking for the exact same house. And you technically put it, or let's say Pam does, you and Pam go out and have a cup of coffee, and Pam says, man, I really want this house. My buyers are going crazy. They want to be in Ardea, and man, it's a 3-bedroom. And you're thinking, wow, I've got it, Pam. You can tell Pam, hey, Pam, you know what? It's not active, but I have it on waiver. I'll call them and ask if they can look at it now. It's not ready. And Pam may say, doesn't matter if it's ready. My people are ready to buy it now, cash, hard cash, and they'll do all the repairs of what they were going to do anyway. So there's the plus of using the waiver to your advantage.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? Dan, did I put you to sleep?
Mr. Trujillo, I have a question. This is Robert
Yes.
Robledo.
Oh, I still don't see your face, Robert. How am I ever going to know you're there? All right.
So in the listing agreement, it shows the parties. It has a space for 2 sellers. What if it's a situation where there's multiple sellers on the deed, like 5 or 6 people, or if the seller is a multiple member LLC, where there's more than 2? How do you put that in the contract?
Anybody want to take a shot at that? I can answer. Pretty simple question. Yeah, go ahead, Dan.
An addendum.
There you go. Remember that addendum is the most powerful tool you can use in anything. If you don't have space for it, you create an addendum, and right there within the where it has the names of the seller says, please see addendum number 1. You can name them all. You have 20 people there. That's kind of unruly, but that is what it is. I recently did a property that had 6 people in the family, and they had a personal representative. That's all I used on that entire contract. And it was the responsibility of that personal representative to sign off on all documents. And she went back to talk to her brothers and sisters about it, because I certainly didn't want to get in contract with more than 1 property. Yes, Danny.
The form, Beth, the waiver form.
Uh-huh.
Do you know the number offhand so I can look at it?
It's just our regular SFAR waiver that we have, the one that we've been using. I don't think there's a number to it. It's the one that we have. The same one. Great. Well, we have some new faces on here today. I'm sorry I didn't see you. Bill's here. Chris Green is here. Good to see you. Connie's. I haven't seen Connie for a while, but talked to her yesterday on the phone. So it's always good to do that. And incidentally, guys, and I know that Ted will be putting another notice out on it tomorrow, which we would have had in this place, but you couldn't do it. We have a very special guest, and that's Ashley Martin tomorrow. Ashley Martin Strauss. She's going to be doing a class at 1 o'clock on real estate contracts, and we're seeing some of those pop up. And you can make a lot of money on real estate contracts. Honestly, I did. You know, you're carrying your own paper. You don't need the cash all up front. She's going to do that. But more importantly is you always need to have an escrow company to work with you on a real estate contract. And Ashley is opening up her own. So what better person to have a class with tomorrow, a lawyer as well as a person who's an owner of it. So pass that around, and I know Ted will be getting something out on it as well. That's tomorrow at 1 o'clock, same channel, same back station. Okay. Not too hard. The listing agreement is not hard. Read it. You know, you guys, for some of you guys who have called me on 1 or 2 occasions, and you guys already know my new habit. So, well, what did the contract say? Well, why don't you read it back? So, you know, and I'm not picking on you guys, but the truth be said is 9 times out of 10, you know, no different than me. You just got to read it and say, what is it telling me? And I'm here, and you know, some of you guys, and you know, I'm looking at Dan and certainly looking at Pam all the years. We no longer are me telling them. It's we're discussing it. We're now saying, well, this is how I said, this is how you said, you know, and that's where you want to grow. You know, my job is not to, you know, to enable you, it's to educate you. And it's very good feeling to me is when we're having that conversation peer to peer, not QB to broker. And that's because I want you guys that, you know, if I could take everything that I have in my head and just put it in y'all's, I'd do it in a heartbeat. But, you know, so one of these days I will retire, not anything soon, but, you know, and I want to make sure that you're passing that knowledge on to the new brokers. That's the other thing. Never be afraid to pick up a broker. That's the nice thing about all the Zoom. You're beginning to know each other face to face. And I know that you've picked up the phone more than once. Dan, people have talked to you. I know they have. And the same thing, Robert, people have talked to you. So those are those things that you want to do. And, you know, and if you don't have the answer, you can't think, oh, hell, let's talk to Tom, see what it is. It isn't that I'm trying to slough off my duties, but sometimes you can't always find me. I'm doing something. All right. Ted, did we get internet back up so I can head back down there? Ted's frozen. Maybe not. You know if we got anybody down there? I guess nobody's down there right now. All right. Well, I'm going to try to run down the office. Some of the people are floating around there, and maybe I can answer some questions. But it's always good to see you. I forgot what next week is. I think we start on those individual forms, stuff like you know, that septic and that ORW, those things that always drive you crazy when you have the deal going down. So you know, I appreciate you guys being there. So every Tuesday I'll be on the QB corner and just sharpen your tools. All right, guys. See you soon. Hopefully see you at 3 o'clock. Bye-bye.